Good morning. I couldn't agree more, by the way. Our faith should exude from our lives naturally. People should detect it in us in everything that we say and everything that we do. So that was a great illustration. I appreciated that very much. I want to begin with an interesting fact. I'm big on stuff like this. I'm kind of a history nerd and stuff, so little details like this. This is kind of Discovery Channel stuff here. Uh-oh. Well, we're good to go? Okay. I thought maybe I did something. But in the early 20th century, there was an interest in exploring, and oh yeah, I forgot, before I begin this, to follow off on what Val said in his announcements. He was absolutely right, everything that he said. When we're done here, we'll dismiss. We'll probably take a 15-minute, 20-minute break, tops, grab some coffee, grab a sandwich. You can bring those things in with you and sit down if you'd like. You know, I mean, try not to spill stuff, but you can. Do what you need to do, put a lid on it. And we will resume the annual meeting somewhere between 15 or 20 minutes after the service is over. I'll give you a 5-minute warning and stuff like that. We won't be incredibly long. It's not going to be hours to be here. Everybody's invited to be here, even if you're a member or non-member, to participate. The annual meeting packets were published in advance, so we're not going to read through every report. You've already had a chance to read them yourselves. We'll entertain questions about them. I'll give you a quick financial brief. We'll elect the new officers and we'll go home, okay? But that's going to be happening shortly after the service, and so Val was totally right. But again, back to the message here. In the early 20th century, there was a great interest in exploring the Arctic and the Antarctic portions of the globe, and there were a number of people heading down and up during that time to do that. So Robert Peary reached the North Pole in 1901, and Roald Amundsen reached the South Pole in 1911, followed by Robert Scott, who reached it just over a month later, but then his expedition perished on the way back. And in that same period, Sir Ernest Shackleton attempted a trans-Antarctic expedition designed to make a land crossing over the Antarctic continent. Unfortunately, Shackleton's expedition never even reached Antarctica. Their ship, which was called the Endurance, got trapped in pack ice, and they drifted helplessly until the pressure of the ice sank the ship, trapping his men on the ice. I have a buzz in the back here. I'm not sure where that's coming from. One of the monitors is going on off there, but they drifted helplessly in the ice. The pressure crunched the ship and sank it, and so the men were trapped on the ice. And they eventually made their way on foot and used lifeboats to reach Elephant Island, but they were still in big trouble because they were still near Antarctica. They were way too far south for passing ships to find them, and their environment itself was, the environment they were in, was so inhospitable that it couldn't sustain them. So it was at this point that Shackleton made the journey that he is most famous for to this day. He took the strongest of his remaining lifeboats and 5 of his men and set out on the 800-mile journey north from where they were to South Georgia. There was a whaling station there called Grytviken where he could find help and come back for his men. But the journey was extremely dangerous, to say the least. Between them and their destination were some of the roughest waters in the entire ocean, and they were known to sink whole ships. And Shackleton and his companions, in order to reach South Georgia, he would have to pass through those 800 miles of rough seas in a 22-foot lifeboat. And I put a picture up on the board for you to see. That's what he had to sail in with 5 of his men, was a 22-foot lifeboat. And that wasn't the only issue that he was up against there. Even if they managed to not get broken apart and capsized by the waves they were traveling through, they still had to successfully hit South Georgia, which is only 104 miles wide. That seems big, but when you're talking about a vast ocean and sailing 800 miles, that's not very big at all. If they missed the island, all would be lost. They would obviously perish, and all of the men that were counting on them to get help would also perish. And it was extremely difficult to navigate due to the near constant cloud covering and inhospitable weather in that region. So the feat that laid before them was, in summary, to travel 800 miles in open water through some of the most treacherous seas on the globe, and at the same time they had to maintain their course perfectly enough to hit a tiny little island in the vast ocean while having very little opportunity to take navigational readings. Sounds like a run-of-the-mill thing, right? It's absolutely incredible that they pulled it off, but they ended up making it in 17 days. And they sailed through hurricane force winds They nearly perished multiple times, and when they finally did make it to land, their lifeboat was on the verge of breaking apart. And so they turned what was left of it over and made it into a little shelter for two of his men who simply couldn't go on after all that they'd been through. They'd been basically sailing 24 hours a day trying to survive for 17 days. Two of his men couldn't go on. The rest of them put their boots on and made their way across the island to the whaling station, and in the end, they were able to get help and rescue everybody. Now, over the course of those 17 days of near constant wind and waves, there were 6 breaks in the clouds, which enabled their navigator who was with them to take readings with his sextant and attempt to plot where they were located each time. And even then, the seas were so horribly rough that 2 men had to hold him steady as he attempted to take the readings. If you can just imagine being in a lifeboat, just getting tossed all over the place and trying to shoot an azimuth and being held still so you can try to get some semblance of an accurate reading because your lives depend upon it. 6 times the clouds broke so he could take a little bit of a reading and hopefully calculate where they were effectively. Now, in these terrible and incredible conditions, they hit their mark. And to this day, this feat continues to stand as one of the greatest small craft sailing feats that has ever been accomplished. And I share this example because our church experience over the past year has felt a bit like Shackleton's voyage. We've been in the midst of a huge storm all year long, and sticking with the boat analogy for just a little bit longer, our little church is a lot more like a lifeboat than an ocean liner. You know what I'm saying? It's not very big. And we were already weakened and struggling before we even went into the COVID storm, and we spent the last year fighting to keep our little boat above water in the midst of a hurricane. At least that's how it's felt sometimes as we've kind of journeyed through this year. Now, because we've been in survival mode for so long, it can feel disorienting. We can be asking ourselves, where are we as a church? What are we doing? Where are we going? What's the point of everything that we're doing? Has anything changed? And these questions are completely understandable, and this morning I hope to address them to some degree. In Shackleton's voyage, every once in a while the clouds would break, as we already talked about. They would break enough for them to take sextant readings and regain their bearings. And each time they would find out that despite the constant struggle for survival, their little boat was still on course and making progress towards their goal. And in the same way, I would encourage you to think of this morning's message and the annual meeting to follow as kind of a little break in the clouds, okay? The storm's not over yet. There are still rough seas ahead, but we have an opportunity to take some readings and replot our location so that we can see where we've traveled as we've been fighting along through the storm. And I'm just going to be straight up with you. There are still challenges in front of us. I can't stand up here and tell you that magically everything's just going to be wonderful in 2021. I hope it is. Maybe it will be, but I certainly can't guarantee that. And to tell you anything like that would be to give you unrealistic expectations. No one's saying that right now. We don't know what's in front of us. But I can show you that just as with Shackleton's voyage, we've been sailing forward all year, even though sometimes we've been hanging on for dear life. The whole time. We've actually been sailing forward all year. So follow along with me as I describe our church and where it's at and where it's going. This isn't going to be your normal run-of-the-mill message, and I apologize for that. I'm taking some liberty for our annual meeting here. And what I mean is we're not going to have a scriptural text and a scriptural study in a normal sense. We're going to talk about the practical workings of a church and how to understand it and how it relates to us accomplishing our mission overall. So follow along with me. There are 3 basic components to a church. First, there is the vision, and the vision is the purpose for the church's existence and its core values. The vision is the ideas that fuel a church's mission and the standards that govern its actions. Without vision, there is no basis for a church gathering and for church ministry, and everyone who gets involved in a church is motivated to do so by the principles and standards that guide it. In other words, we all come here for a reason. And the reason that we come here is where we find the church's vision. In that reason, that's where the church's vision lies. Thus, without vision, church gatherings and ministries can't come into existence. It's as simple as that. The mere existence of Niagara Alliance Church as an organization is proof in itself that a vision for our church existed first. And I'll talk more about that as we go along, but just keep that in mind now. Because we're here, it's evidence that there was a vision for us first. Secondly, there is the discipleship culture. The discipleship culture. The discipleship culture is the environment in which the church's vision is instilled in the hearts of the church's people. This is much bigger than a program, just to be clear. We're talking about a culture, we're not talking about a program. This is much bigger than teaching videos and book studies. Though these things are good, they do play a part. I'm not trying to talk negatively about them in any way. I'm just saying that the discipleship culture is bigger than programs and books and studies. It's a whole environment with certain values and norms baked into it that guide our spiritual development. Much of the norms and the values that we practice in life today are a function of the environment or the culture that we were brought up in, for good or for bad. Would you agree with me if I said that? The things that we practice, the values that we hold, were baked into us and instilled upon us because of our culture and our upbringing. Not totally, but it had a big effect upon us. If you believe in hard work and no free handouts, you were most likely brought up in an environment that practiced this value. If you believe in always opening the door for a lady, you were most likely brought up in an environment where chivalry was practiced. I was brought up in an environment where chivalry was practiced. Holly thrived in that environment. And to this day, I don't think Holly even knows how to work a door. They just open for her automatically. If you've ever seen her, she walks along and she has this like natural cuteness about her where she just kind of walks along and has a big smile on her face. And there's something about the way that she carries herself that the doors just fly open in front of her. There's always someone there to pull it open. So as far as she's concerned, every door's electric. They just all open. And I'm not joking. Sometimes she'll walk up to a door and stand there and go, Mostly that's when a message to me when she walks up to the car door and stands there and it's not opening for her. It's more like, Dan, step it up. You're forgetting something very important here. But you get the idea. There's something cultural in that. Not everyone feels the same way about it, but both Holly and I gel in that area. On the flip side, negative behaviors can be reinforced by culture as well. Children of alcoholics and drug addicts often go on to become alcoholics and drug addicts themselves. Not always, but it happens a lot. And it's truly baffling how often children who suffered abuse in their childhood go on to become abusers themselves. Why is that the case? It's because culture is what instills values. And with that in mind, a whole culture of discipleship is what is necessary to instill a God-honoring vision into a church community, okay? So there's a discipleship culture, and lastly, we have the organizational base. The organizational base. And what we mean by organizational base, we're referring to the people of the church themselves who are committed to the church's vision with their time and with their resources. And so this last component of the church is the most visible and tangible part of the church. It's the part of the church that everyone sees. It's the people in the pews. It's where the money comes from to build the buildings and fund ministry activities that people see and experience. That's all part of the organizational base. The organizational base of the church, the building, the people, and the ministries is what people most commonly consider to be the church. When people think of the church, when people think of Niagara Alliance Church, they're thinking of the organizational base. That's what comes to their mind first. But in reality, it's not the whole church. It's only part of the church. It's not the sum total. It's just a part of it. Now, I want to illustrate this with my son's martial arts dojo so you can kind of get an idea of how these dynamics work a little bit. Project Future is where he attends and gets lessons. Project Future has an organizational base. There are lots of people who are committed to learning the disciplines of what is called Bushido Kai, which is taught there. And these people learn these skills in a building, which is located at 2720 Niagara Falls Boulevard, and it's visible right from the corner of Whitmore Road and the Boulevard. So you can actually recognize Project Future by the sign out front on the corner. You can see it as you're heading away from here. And all those people that go there pay money every month in the form of tuition, which is used to cover all the expenses of the organization, so all the stuff that it does can continue on. Now, the average person would describe the organizational base as Project Future, and it is in part. But when you peel back the layers, we can see that there is more to Project Future than that. Inside the organization itself, there is a firmly established discipleship culture. It's baked into the environment there. It permeates everything that they do. There are various skill levels of Bushido Kai designated by the different belts that people wear. These range from a 9th degree black belt, which is worn by Master Heisner, who is the founder of the dojo, and there are other people way down at the other end who wear white belts, which means they are just now beginning to learn the skills. Danny, my son, currently wears a brown belt with a black stripe, which is one step below a 1st degree black belt. That's how far up he is on the chain now. A handful of the highest level belts teach the classes, and all of the other students practice and learn the various skills together. But the higher level belted student, the higher they are on that level, the more they are responsible to help and instruct and guide the lower belted students. There's kind of a responsibility that comes along with it as you ascend up the ranks. And because Danny's belt level is relatively high, he stays longer at the dojo and guides and demonstrates for the lower belted students in their classes. And within the dojo, there are practices designed to communicate respect for what they're learning and the people that they're learning with. For example, they don't wear shoes in the dojo, in the training area. They bow to each other before sparring. They call each other sir and ma'am quite a bit. It's almost unusual how much they use sir and ma'am there. And I'm also told that higher belted students have a limited degree of authority over lower belted students. I found this out, I didn't know it right away, but Danny can assign push-ups to lower belted students. And one time I was taking him home in the car, and I said, how's class going? And he was telling me he was working with this kid that was acting up all the time, and he said, that's it, I gave him push-ups. I said, you gave him push-ups? He's like, yeah, I was like, nice, So my son drops people for push-ups every now and again. I didn't know this about him, which means I shouldn't join up, because then he would be able to drop me for push-ups. And that's not going to happen. But the idea here is that there is a whole culture baked into the DNA of the dojo that deeply instills what they're teaching into the hearts of their students. Does that make sense? It's baked into everything that they do. And this is an instrumental part of what Project Future is, that people don't necessarily see when they're driving past it on Niagara Falls Boulevard. They see the organization, but they don't see the culture baked inside. That's a different level. That's deeper down there. But there is one more part to Project Future that's at the core of it all. Project Future also has a vision. It exists to teach the martial arts discipline of Bushido Kai to others. And this is the whole reason that people go there every week and pay tuition to keep the lights on. So it's not an overstatement to say that without this mission driving people, Project Future simply couldn't exist. The vision, that concept fuels the organization itself. It exists to fulfill that mission. Also, there are certain core values called the tenets of Bushido Kai that guide the way that students use the skills that they learn. I don't know them offhand, Danny does, but these inform the discipleship culture as they instill these skills and disciplines. So Project Future is most visible and tangible to people as an organization, with committed people and a building and money coming in and all that kind of stuff. But underneath the organization is Project Future's vision and discipleship culture, which provide the foundation for the organization. And these are not visible to the naked eye, but they're just as much a part of it. And without them, Project Future couldn't exist as an organization. This works much like a standard house. Let's see if I'm turned on. Oh, I'm not turned on here. What's going on? I want to advance my slide, guys. Let's see what happens here. I'm going to give it one more try. There we go. Now we're gonna take just a pause just for a second here and see. All right. I don't know what was going on, but it wasn't working now. Now we're back online. Okay. So what I just described is much like a standard house. The visible part of the house is above ground. But that's not all there is to the house, right? There is the foundation below ground, providing strength and stability to it. And though the foundation isn't as visible, it's just as much as a part of the house as everything else. And without the foundation, the visible part of the house above ground wouldn't be able to stand. It would eventually collapse. Does that make sense? That's the idea there. Churches work the same way, all right? Our organizational base is the most visible and tangible part of the church. The organizational base is the most visible and tangible part of the church. It's the part of the church that we see, it's the part that we interact with and experience the most. However, underneath the organizational base are the vision and discipleship culture. And though these are much less visible, they provide the foundation for the organization's existence. And without these foundations, the church organization can't really even form to begin with. And if we lose these foundations, the organization will collapse. So here's where I'm going with all of this, okay? Our church currently exists as an organization. There's no question about it. We're here meeting now. We're in this place. We're all together. We currently exist as an organization. And what this automatically means is that at some point in the past, a vision existed that gave birth to our organization. Also, there was a discipleship culture that existed to cause it to grow and to become stronger into the church that it was. However, the organizational base of our church is currently struggling. And don't think I'm saying anything new here. I think this isn't like a big secret. Everyone can see it and know we've known that it's been tough going for a while. It's been struggling since the day I got here. And my predecessor, Pastor Mark Patterson, inherited a similar state of struggle the whole time he was here as well. And so what does this mean? It means that somewhere along the way, the foundations of the church became compromised. Does that make sense? That's what it means. Somewhere along the way, the foundations of the church became compromised. It means that along the way, through the confusion and splits and divisive building campaigns and complicated merges and all the stuff that has happened over this church's existence, somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of our vision and our discipleship culture. We've just become detached and lost sight of those things. It means that we've lost our foundation, which is causing our organizational base to collapse on itself. That's why every year it seems like we keep having problem after problem. It shouldn't be surprised when you realize there's nothing under there holding it up. That's why that's happening. Now, year after year, as the church continues to struggle, we keep longing for some new way to get people in and more money and volunteers to do ministry, but nothing ever seems to change this constant grind that's going on and on and on. Why? It's because you can't strengthen the organizational base without a foundation under it. To do so is like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. It isn't going to change anything. The base is going down. You have to go to the source of the problem, and this is deeper than the organization itself. And with this in mind, the real solution, the only thing that can really turn that around is to rebuild the foundation. We must restore the church's vision, and we must restore the church's discipleship culture. Only then can the organizational base of the church return to health. Now, sticking with Shackleton's voyage at the beginning, I want to give you 3 thoughts that should help us to gain our bearings of where we are and where we're going in light of this information, okay? I'm going to think again like we're peeking through the clouds and just seeing where we've progressed with this so far. So here's 3 thoughts to consider on everything that I just told you. First, we're already rebuilding the foundation. In fact, we've been rebuilding the foundation for a couple of years now. This is really nothing new. The ideas that I'm presenting here this morning shouldn't sound completely new to you. I've been speaking of the church's need for a clear vision and strong discipleship culture for several years. And over the past few years especially, I've worked to mobilize the church towards this effort in a more concentrated way. And back in 2019, we initiated a church-wide sermon-based small group ministry and brought Pastor Mark in at that time to put focused energy into cultivating a discipleship culture at the church. Since then, we've seen measurable developments, but that was initiated back in 2019. But again, as we said earlier, Discipleship Foundation, it isn't a program. It can't just be initiated as some kind of a book study or a program with immediate results. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. Those things are part of it, but you just can't start a new program or a new study and have immediate results. We're talking about a culture here. We're talking about a way of life, an environment that's baked into our DNA that instills the values that we're teaching. And the process of forming a culture within Niagara Alliance Church, where learning how to live like Jesus is baked into everything that we do, that takes time. Just like with Bushido Kai and Project Future and the stuff I described there, that wasn't all just automatically there. It took time to cultivate that and develop that. And so we've made some real progress on this. We've begun framing the foundation, but we're far from having an established culture of discipleship at Niagara Alliance Church. And the path forward isn't some new thing. It's to continue building upon what we started. Keep working at it. Also, last year, the elders spent the whole year working to clarify our vision and disseminate it to the body. And this effort was halted short of completion by a variety of circumstances surrounding the pandemic. However, progress was made, and the work will be resumed this year. It's not going to stop. And I can't emphasize enough how absolutely essential it is to the health of our church to have a clear vision. This is why we keep seeing people go out the doors. If we don't have a clear set of goals and a clear set of values guiding us that we all agree upon, then we're going to keep having friction every time we hit a tough issue. We all have to be playing off the same sheet of music in order to have a firm foundation to be able to build upon. And some might argue that, we already are all on the same page. We're already on the same page. We're not. I would argue that we are not, all right? And I'm not trying to pull off scabs here. I'm trying to bring things to mind that you guys can all see. Our transition inside the church from summer to fall, when we transitioned inside, was just the latest example of the fact that we're not all on the same page. When it came time to move worship back inside the building, the church really heaved quite a bit when we were trying to figure out whether we should gather inside or not, whether we should wear masks and restrictions when we do or not. And again, this isn't a right or wrong issue. It wasn't about good versus evil or anything like that. Everybody's views were always about honoring God. That really was what it was about. But they were just different philosophies of ministry, and there was a lot of tension there during that time. And if we had all been on the same page with understood values ahead of time going into that, we would have been able to move through those waters better than we did in the fall. And the reason that there was friction there is because there was no clarity of values in advance to be able to guide us. And that's what values do. That's why we need those things. Talking about our values is uncomfortable, but until we address the issue, we can expect to keep having problems and issues when stuff like that happens. So the problem of our foundations has already been identified. That's why I'm telling you this. We've already seen it. This isn't new. I'm not announcing a new initiative here. It's something we've already been working on. But the repair of our foundations, it doesn't happen overnight. It's going to take time. There is no magic bullet that's going to bring instant success here. The only solution is to keep working at it, keep framing, stay the course, and work at it till we get it, all right? So that's the first thought. The second thought is that we have been strengthening the organizational base of the church right along, and we will continue to do so. We've been doing it right along, and we will continue to. When we realize that our root problem as a church is in the foundation, then there is a temptation to ignore the organizational base and just focus upon the foundation. If you're looking back over what I just told you and saying, I see what you're saying, it is in the foundation. Well, let's just leave the organization alone. And let's just focus on the foundation. But that would be a mistake. And here's why. What we're in the middle of as a church is akin to moving the structure of a house off its foundation to rebuild it and then set it back on. That's basically what we're doing here. There's still a structure there. The foundation is rotted, so we're trying to pick the house up. And we're trying to rebuild the foundation and set the house back on again. And what happens to the house when you're moving it? Is it stable? It has to be stabilized. It has to be strengthened. We have to put energy into that to keep it together during the process, or it's going to fall apart before we get it back on the firm ground again. So the organizational base must be strengthened, and we've been doing that right along. From day one, we've been doing things to light up the runway to help people find their way into this body. We've built a website, we've posted sermons online, we've launched outreaches like Wheatfield Picnic that made us more visible in the community. We set up online giving and membership classes to make it easier for people to commit themselves to the body. And over the past 9 years that I've been here, we've seen many, many new people come to our church and stay with us. I'm not exaggerating. If you just think back, I've been here almost a decade now. If you think back, there has been a lot of people that have come through over these years as a result of just answering the call. The runway was lit up and they found their way in. But unfortunately, over that same period of time, we've seen just as many people leave. They've come in and they've gone out at kind of the same pace. And it's kind of like holes in a bucket where you pour water in and the water just kind of trickles right back out again because it's full of holes. It's because the foundation is bad. That's why it happens that way. However, if we weren't pouring the water into the bucket to replace what was leaking out, then the whole thing would have folded by now. Does that make sense? That's why it's really, really important to continue to work on the organization during that time. It's discouraging to see people going through. I get it. Believe me, it discourages me more than anyone else. But if you don't keep pouring energy on that, and they're going to trickle through and there's going to be nothing else. So we need to build the foundations, but we need to keep the energy in the organization as well. So we can't neglect the organizational base while we rebuild the foundation. We have to do both. And towards that end, in 2021, we will be building upon our new digital capabilities. And I'm just adding to stuff that's already been done, but we'll be doing that as well. We're going to be promoting more and more our live streaming capability. We'll make it easier for people to participate in Sunday services and in small groups online. And we're going to work to include those who can't make it in person right now, but who are willing to participate digitally. We're going to expand our base, all right, to people not only in this church, but people who are outside it who want to cooperate with it digitally. And we're going to make ways for them to do that. And in doing so, again, we're going to expand the base so that this church is strengthened and supported, not just by the people that are here on Sunday morning, but by people that are outside as well. And they don't even have to live in this area. They can live in other states. But that's one of the ways that we're going to help stabilize the organization going forward. But lastly, there are ways that you can help strengthen all three parts of the church. We've talked about them. There are ways that all of you here can help strengthen all three parts. First, you can strengthen the vision by considering what goals and values drive you personally as you follow Jesus. Take your own personal inventory. Find out why you're here, what drives you, all right? Through this, you can help the leadership find that vision alignment as a church body. And just remember how important vision alignment is. It's tempting to just avoid it because when we bring stuff like that up, it tends to raise uncomfortable conversations. But I'm telling you, if we don't plug that hole, we're never going to get our vision clear. And if we never get our vision clear, we're never going to fix the foundation. That's part of it. Secondly, you can strengthen the discipleship culture. And you can do that by becoming part of it, if you haven't already. A lot of the people here already have. I'm looking out in the audience right now, most of you have. You can strengthen it further by becoming part of it, by joining a small group, if you haven't already done so. I know life is busy, but please work on fitting this in consistently because it's a huge part of spiritual growth. Also, we're talking about building a culture here, so we're not talking about just joining a program that's going to have instantaneous results. We're talking about building a culture where people come into Niagara Alliance Church and they learn what it means to walk with Jesus and to live like Jesus and to follow Jesus in everything that they do here. We're talking about creating a culture where people don't walk in, hear some teaching, and then walk back out and don't apply it. We're talking about creating a place that forces you to hear it and to apply it and to interact with the body as well in the process. So be part of the culture to help us to form the culture, and see Pastor Mark, who is always on standby to plug you in to whatever small groups and gatherings might be available. And lastly, you can strengthen the organizational base by ramping up your commitment to Niagara Alliance Church in general. You can volunteer in ministries as needs become available. In the back, we're full of volunteers right now. There's a lot of things that have to be done in the back, and we have people there helping us. You can support the church financially and on a consistent basis. We appreciate, by the way, any financial support that comes, but the most helpful financial support is the consistent and recurring and predictable support that comes every week or every month in a predictable way, because that's how we can pay our bills and that's how we can build our budgets. You can also become a member if you haven't already. You can make Niagara Alliance Church your home and commit to deploying your spiritual gifts in the context of this body. We do, in order to grow, need to live out our spiritual gifts in the context of somebody. So those are the three building blocks of the church. We are working upon them all, and we are continuing to do so. So this was a tough year. I know that's the understatement of the century, but it was. And it can feel like because of how rough it was, it can feel like that we're on the brink of disaster as a church. But I hope you're seeing now, and maybe we'll talk more in the annual meeting, that really isn't the case at all. This year, we've kept sailing forward. It's just been rougher seas. We actually haven't stopped moving forward at all. And I know everyone here is committed to Niagara Alliance Church, and I know that you all want it to succeed. And I also know that many of you have been trying to turn things around longer than me. I've been here almost 10 years. A lot of you have been here longer, and you've been working with this church for a long time. And it can be discouraging to struggle year after year. But I want to reassure you that we are headed the right direction, and there is no quick fix to this problem. We actually are on the right road here, and a slow and steady pace forward and the courage to stay at it and keep working these things is what will turn things around. And so I want to remind you that God is doing things here. We hear testimonies of the things that he's doing all the time. Nothing has changed. The seas have been rough, but we've been sailing the entire time. We will continue to do so. Nothing is going to close this church down. There's no mandate that's going to stop us from preaching the gospel and doing our mission. We may do things differently because of COVID or whatnot, but nothing's going to stop it. And so I want to encourage you, and I want to thank you for staying with us, and I want to encourage you to stay with us in the future. And with that said, let's just take a moment, let's pray for our mission and for the health of this body, and then we'll dismiss for a few minutes and we'll have annual meeting. Heavenly Father, we thank you that you have been with us the entire time. You are with us in the storm. And we're not strong because of the resources or abilities that we have, but we're strong because we have you. And I pray that you'd help us to stick together, and I pray that you'd help us to build upon the gains that we've made. And I pray that you'd help us to be a witness to this community. And as Stephanie had suggested, I pray that your love and your gospel and your kingdom would exude from our lives naturally in everything that we say and in everything that we do. And I pray that that would be true not only for us as individuals, but it would be true for us as a church as well. And we ask these things in Jesus' name. And all of God's people said, amen.